Welcome back to StorySphere. The plate shattered on the marble floor, and the whole dining room went silent. Adaeze Okonkwo was already on her knees, gathering the broken pieces with her bare hands. When Ngozi stood up from her chair, 30 guests watched, forks stopped halfway to open mouths. Somewhere, a glass was set down too gently, the way people do when they're about to enjoy somebody else's shame. "Look at her," Ngozi said, and she laughed. "Look at this thing, crawling on my floor. You see why I keep telling Daddy not to bring gutter people into this house? She has been here 2 years, and she still cannot carry one plate from the kitchen without disgracing us." A piece of china cut into Adaeze's thumb. She did not flinch. She had learned a long time ago that flinching only made them happier. "Are you deaf as well as useless? I am talking to you. Kneel properly and apologize to my guests, house girl, or have you forgotten what you are?" Adaeze looked up, and for 1 second, before she lowered her eyes again, she saw something none of them noticed. She saw Chief Obiageli Nnamdi, the richest man in that room, gripping the edge of the table. His eyes were fixed not on his daughter, not on the broken plate, but on the old necklace hanging at Adaeze's throat. His hands were shaking. Nobody in that room knew what was coming, but you are about to, so grab your popcorn and enjoy. If you love stories where the quiet, broken ones turn out to hold all the power, you are exactly where you need to be. Welcome to StorySphere. Let me take you back to how Adaeze came to that house in the first place, because to understand the ending, you must first understand the suffering. Adaeze Okonkwo was 23 years old, and she had not always cleaned other people's floors. There was a time, a short and far-away time, when she sat at the front of the classroom in Adaeze with the highest marks in her year. Her teachers used to call her our small lawyer because of the way she argued, calm and clear, never raising her voice, but never backing down either. She had wanted to study law. She had the brain for it. What she did not have was money. When her mother, Mama Kayamaka, started coughing blood, everything stopped. The hospital wanted money before they would even look at her. The landlord wanted his rent. The dream of a university wanted school fees that might as well have been the price of the moon. So Adaeze did what poor girls have done since the beginning of time. She folded the dream, put it somewhere deep inside her chest, and went looking for work. That was how she ended up standing at the gate of the Nnamdi mansion in Ikoyi at 6:47 in the morning, 2 years before the night of the broken plate, holding a small bag with everything she owned. The house was the kind of house that did not look real. White walls that climbed into sky, a gate of black iron that opened by itself. Cars parked a row like a showroom, each one worth more than every house on Adaeze Street put together. She stood there and felt small, the way the sea makes you feel small, and a part of her wanted to turn and run back to Adaeze. But Mama Kayamaka was waiting in a rented room with a cough that would not leave. So Adaeze straightened her back and walked in. The woman who hired her was the housekeeper, a tired old woman named Mama Felicia, who had worked in that house for 30 years. She looked Adaeze up and down once, sighed, and said the words Adaeze would remember for a long time. "My daughter, you are too fine and too clever for this work. That is your problem, not your blessing. In this house, the ones who suffer most are the ones who shine. So if you are wise, you will keep your head down, do your work, collect your salary, and let nobody remember your face. Do you hear me?" "Yes, Ma," Adaeze said. She did not yet understand. She would. The master of the house was Chief Obiageli Nnamdi. Everybody simply called him Chief. He was a man in his late 50s, with gray coming into his beard and a quietness about him that made even loud people lower their voices. He had built Nnamdi Holdings from a single market stall into one of the largest companies in Lagos, and people said he was hard as iron in business. But in his own house, he moved like a man carrying something heavy that nobody else could see. He rarely smiled. He never spoke about his past. In his study, there was a photograph that nobody was allowed to touch. It sat in a silver frame on his desk, turned slightly so that only he could see it properly. Once, in her first week, Adaeze had reached to dust it, and Mama Felicia caught her wrist so fast it frightened her. "Never," the old woman whispered. "Never touch that one." The last girl who touched it, he did not raise his voice. He did not even look angry. He just told her to pack her things and go. So never. Adaeze never touched it. But sometimes when she cleaned the study, she would catch the chief sitting in front of that photograph in the dark, not moving, just looking. And she wondered who could put such sadness into the face of a man who had everything. Then there was Ngozi. Ngozi Nnamdi was the chief's brother's daughter. Her own parents had died when she was a small girl, and the chief, who had no children of his own that anyone knew of, had taken her in and raised her like a princess. And princess was a word, because Ngozi believed the world had been built as a footstool for her feet. She was 26, beautiful in the cold way of someone who has never been refused anything. And she had decided very early that she would inherit Nnamdi holdings when the old man died. From the first day, Ngozi looked at Adaeze and saw a threat she could not name, and she dealt with it the only way she knew how, with cruelty. "What is your name again?" "Adaeze? Adaeze." She rolled on her tongue like she was tasting something gone bad. Big name for a small girl. Adaeze means princess. Did you know that? Imagine a princess scrubbing my toilet. And she laughed, and her friends laughed, and Adaeze said nothing. The insults came every single day, and they were never the same twice, because Ngozi was clever about her cruelty. When Adaeze served food, Ngozi said her hand smelled the gutter and it was spoiling her appetite. When Adaeze wore her one good wrapper on a Sunday, Ngozi asked loudly whether the church now allowed beggars to dress like they had stolen from the offering basket. When Adaeze swept the compound, Ngozi told her she swept like a woman who had never owned anything worth keeping clean. "You poor people are becoming too bold these days," Ngozi said once, watching Adaeze polish the banister. "In my grandmother's time, a house girl knew her level. She did not look you in the eye. She did not have opinions. You carry your head like you are somebody. Let me tell you something for free. A person should know her level before she lifts her eyes to a Nnamdi. You will be cleaning floors when you are old and gray. That is what God wrote for people like you." Adaeze finished the banister. She did not cry when Ngozi could see. She had a rule about that. She would cry at night in the small servants' quarters, with her face in the thin pillow, so that nobody could hear. And in the morning her eyes would be clear, and she would go back to work. That was how she survived, one day at a time, one swallowed insult at a time, sending almost every naira she earned back home to Mama Kayamaka, and the medicine that kept her breathing. There's a thing that happens to a person who is treated as less than human for a long time, and it is not what people imagine. People imagine that you become bitter, that hatred fills you up like water filling a clay pot. But that is not what happened to Adaeze, and it is not what happens to most who suffer that way. What happened was quieter and stranger. She became smaller. She learned to take up less space, to make less sound, to need less, to want less. Until one day she caught her own reflection in the glass of the chief's display cabinet, and did not recognize the bent, careful, invisible woman looking back. The girl who had once stood at the front of a classroom and argued like a lawyer was still in there somewhere. But she had learned to fold that girl up and hide her, the same way her mother had folded up the truth, because in that house, a girl with her head up was a girl asking for trouble. And yet, there were small mercies, the way there always are, even in the hardest places. There was Mama Felicia, the old housekeeper, who would sometimes leave an extra piece of meat in Adaeze's portion and pretend it was a mistake. There was Sunday morning, the one half-day Adaeze had to herself, when she would take 2 buses of Adjugunal and sit with her mother, hold her hand, listen to her cough, and tell her every single week the same gentle lie, that the work was fine, that the people were kind, that she was happy, because Mama Kayamika had given everything for her daughter, and the least a daughter could do was let her believe the sacrifice had landed somewhat soft. "You are too thin," her mother would say every Sunday, peering at her. "Are they feeding you in that big house?" "They are feeding me well." "Mama, stop worrying. Worry is bad for your chest." And the madam's family, they treat me with respect, like one of their own, Mama. And Adaeze would smile, and her mother, who had spent her own life smiling lies for love, would choose to believe the lie, because believing it was the only thing that let her sleep. That was the rhythm of Adaeze's life for 2 years. Suffering in the day, smallness in the evening, and 1/2 day a week of pretending, for her mother's sake, to be someone whose life had not been stolen. She did not complain. She did not break. She simply endured, the way the tortoise on her necklace was supposed to teach, slow and patient, carrying her whole house on her back, waiting for a tomorrow she no longer truly believed was coming. There was only one person in that house who treated Adaeze like a human being, and that was the last person she expected. It was the chief. She noticed it in small things at first. He started saying good morning to her, which the rich do not do to their servants. When she brought his tea, he would ask, in his quiet voice, how she was, and he seemed to actually wait for the answer. Once he found her eating alone in the kitchen a small portion of rice, because she sent her food money home. And the next day, Mama Felicia told her, looking confused, that the chief had given a standing instruction that the house girl, Adaeze, was to eat full meals from the family kitchen, and there would be no argument about it. Adaeze did not understand it. She was grateful, but she did not understand it. And neither did Ngozi, who watched the old man's strange softness toward the house girl with eyes that grew colder by the week. What Adaeze did not know, what nobody in that house knew, was the thing the chief saw every time he looked at her. She had a necklace, an old, thin chain with a small pendant shaped like a tortoise, the kind a village craftsman would make. Nothing valuable, nothing that would catch a thief's eye. She never took it off. Her mother had given it to her when she was a child, and had told her, with a strange fierceness, "This is from your father. Whatever happens in this life, do not lose it. It is the only thing he ever gave you, and one day it may give you back something you lost." Adaeze had never met her father. Mama Kayamika would not speak of him. The story was only that he was a wicked man from a wealthy family who had thrown them away, and that was the end of it. The first time Chief Obiagela Namdi saw that tortoise pendant around the neck of his house girl, something happened in his chest that he could not explain himself, because he had seen that pendant before. He had held its twin in his own hand 25 years ago, on the worst night of his life. But he told himself it was a coincidence. The world is full of tortoise pendants. He was an old man being foolish. And so he said nothing, and he watched, and he waited, and he suffered in silence, the way he had taught himself to suffer. Which brings us back to the night of the broken plate. Here is where it gets interesting. So stay with me, because StorySphere is just getting started. It was Ngozi's birthday. The house was full of important people, the kind who own newspapers and sit on boards, and Ngozi was at the center of all of it, glowing, queen of the evening. Adaeze had been on her feet since 5 in the morning. By the time she carried the tray of fine china into the dining room, her hands were not entirely her own anymore. The carpet's edge caught her foot. The plate slipped, and that is where we began. On her knees, blood on her thumb, 30 pairs of eyes, and Ngozi rising from her chair to perform the humiliation she had been waiting 2 years to perform, in front of an audience worth performing for. Apologize, house girl. On your knees now. That is enough. The voice was not loud, but it stopped the room the way thunder stops a room. Chief Obiagela Namdi had risen from his seat at the head of the table, and he was not looking at the broken plate. "Daddy, I said enough, Ngozi." He came around the table slowly, an old lion that everyone in that room had forgotten was still a lion. He knelt. The chief of Namdi Holdings knelt on his own marble floor, in front of 30 important guests, and took the broken china from Adaeze's bleeding hands. "Get up, my daughter," he said softly, and Adaeze did not even notice the word he used. But Ngozi did. "You are not the one who should be on the floor tonight. Daddy, you are embarrassing me. In front of everybody. Over a house girl. The chief stood. He looked at his guests, at his niece, at the whole glittering room. And when he spoke, his voice was tired in a way that frightened people more than anger would have. In this house, we have forgotten how to see people. I have forgotten it too, for a long time. But not tonight. He turned to Adaeze. Go and see to your hand, and then go and rest. The plates can wait. He did not see the look on Ngozi's face as Adaeze left the room. But Adaeze saw it, and she knew, with the certainty of a girl who's been hunted before, that something was coming for her. She was right. Ngozi did not sleep that night. She sat at the window of her room, watching the lights of Lagos, and she made a decision. The old man was getting soft, and a soft old man could change his will. A soft old man could decide that a kind-hearted house girl deserved more than a niece who had only ever taken from him. Ngozi had seen poorer threats become disasters. This one had to be removed, cleanly, completely, in a way that could never be undone. She knew exactly who to call. His name was Barrister Tunde Adeyemi, and he had been a family lawyer for 15 years, which meant he knew where everybody was buried, including a few he had helped bury himself. He was a smooth man, the kind who smiled with his mouth and calculated with his eyes, and he had been quietly skimming from the Namdi accounts for 3 years, through a web of paper companies that only he and Ngozi knew about. They were bound together by money and by guilt, which is the strongest rope there is. The girl is a problem. Ngozi told him on the phone. Daddy is attached to her. I want her gone, not just out of the house. Gone, in a way that nobody will ever take her seriously again. Disgraced. Finished. Barrister Tunde was quiet for a moment. And what do I get? You get to keep your freedom, Tunde. Because if Daddy ever decides to bring in outside auditors to review the company before he writes a new will, what do you think they will find in those accounts you have been managing so creatively? The barrister understood. A theft, he said slowly. If the girl is caught stealing, even the chief cannot defend a thief. It is clean. It is simple. People believe it about house girls because they want to believe it. Yes, said Ngozi. Something expensive. Something that cannot be explained away. 3 days later, the chief's late mother's diamond ring, a family heirloom worth more than Adaeze would earn in 20 lifetimes, went missing from the master bedroom safe. And the search, conducted by Ngozi with great public concern, led directly to the small wooden box under Adaeze's bed in the servants' quarters, where the ring was found, wrapped in one of Adaeze's own head ties. The way it unfolded was a small masterpiece of cruelty. Ngozi did not simply accuse. She performed. She first let it be known quietly, to 2 or 3 of the household, that something precious had gone missing from Madame's old jewelry, and she let the worry spread on its own, the way a bad smell spreads through a house, until everyone was looking sideways at everyone else. Then at the dinner hour, when the whole household was gathered and could serve as her audience, she suggested, with great reluctance and many false tears, that perhaps, painful as it was, they should search the staff quarters, just to clear everyone's name, just to be fair. I do not want to do this, she said, pressing a handkerchief to a dry eye. I love everyone in this house. But Daddy's mother's ring is sacred to this family, and if one of us has taken it, hiding it only makes the sin bigger. Let us search. Whoever is innocent has nothing to fear. And of course, when they reached Adaeze's tiny room, when Ngozi herself knelt and reached on the bed with the practiced confidence of someone who knew exactly where to reach, the ring was there, wrapped in Adaeze's own head tie, as if the girl had been foolish enough to hide a fortune in the most obvious place in her own quarters, and then go on serving dinner as though nothing had happened. It made no sense. A clever person could see in one moment that it made no sense. But that is the terrible genius of an accusation against the poor. People do not stop to ask whether it makes sense. They have already decided, long before the ring was found, that a house girl is the kind of person who steals, and the planted ring is not evidence to them. It is merely confirmation of a thing they were always ready to believe. I knew it, Ngozi said, holding the ring up so the whole gathered household could see, her voice breaking with performed sorrow. I knew it from the day she came. We took her in. We fed her. We gave her a roof. And this is how she repays this family, by stealing from the dead. I did not take it, Adaeze said. Her voice did not shake, but it was very quiet, the quiet of someone who has just felt the floor open under her feet. I have never seen that ring before in my life. I did not put it there. Somebody put it there. Of course, that is what you would say. Ngozi turned the gathered staff, playing them like an instrument. You have all seen it with your own eyes. The ring was in her room, in her own head tie. What more do you want, a confession? Thieves do not confess. They lie, the way she is lying to your faces right now. Adaeze looked around the circle of faces she had worked beside for 2 years. The cook, the gardener, the driver, Mama Felicia, and she saw the thing that broke her more than the accusation itself. She saw doubt, not in all of them, but in enough. She saw people she had served and laughed with and covered for begin, slowly, to look at her the way you look at a stranger who might be dangerous. 2 years of quiet decency, and it took Ngozi 90 seconds to wash it all away, because a planted ring weighs more in people's minds than 1,000 small kindnesses. Only Mama Felicia spoke, the old woman who had warned Adaeze on her very first day that the ones who shine suffer most stepped forward, her voice trembling but certain. In 30 years in this house, she said, I have never known this girl take so much as a grain of rice that was not hers. I do not believe it. I will not believe it. Then you are a foolish old woman, Ngozi snapped, and perhaps you should be searched as well. And Mama Felicia fell silent, because she was old and poor, and she too could be thrown into the night with a word. And Adaeze saw her fall silent, and did not blame her even a little. That is what poverty does. It teaches even the kind that there is a limit to how much truth they can afford to tell. Call the police, Ngozi said to the room. Let them take her. A thief belongs in a cell, not in a Namdi house. And here's where the story could have ended the way these stories usually end for poor girls, with a police van and a closed case and a life destroyed by a lie that everyone was happy to believe. But it did not end there, because of 2 things Ngozi had not counted on. The first was Emeka. Emeka was the chief's godson, the child of his oldest friend, who had died years before. The chief had raised him alongside Ngozi, and when Ngozi had grown cold, Emeka had grown into something rare among rich young men. He was decent. He worked in the company, not because he had to, but because he wanted to understand it, and he treated the drivers and the cooks and the cleaners the same way he treated investors, which is to say, like people. He had been away in Abuja for 2 months on business, and he walked into the house on the very afternoon of the accusation, in time to see Adaeze standing in the center of a ring of accusers, her hands shaking. Wait, Emeka said. Wait, wait. Everybody wait. Before anybody calls anybody, I have one question. He looked at the wooden box at the ring, at Ngozi's triumphant face, and his eyes narrowed in the way of a man who has noticed something. Where did she supposedly take this ring from? From Daddy's bedroom safe, Ngozi said. Obviously. The safe with the code that only 3 people in this house know. You, me, and the chief. The safe that sits directly in the line of sight of a security camera that records a server I personally set up. Emeka let that sit in the room. So if Adaeze opened that safe, took that ring, and carried it to her quarters, then we have it on video. We do not need to guess. We do not need to accuse. We can simply watch. For 1/2 of 1 second, Ngozi's face did something it had never done in public before. It slipped. The cameras have been faulty for weeks, she said quickly. Everybody knows that. Do they? Said Emeka. Then let us pull the footage right now and see exactly how faulty they are. But before he could move toward the study, the chief, who had been standing in the doorway listening to all of it, made a sound, a short, sharp sound, his hand going to his chest. And then the most powerful man in Lagos folded slowly to the floor of his own hallway, and the room that had been so eager to destroy a house girl suddenly had a much bigger emergency on its hands. Daddy! Ngozi screamed, and for once the fear in her voice was real, because a dead chief could not protect her either. Call an ambulance. Emeka was on his knees beside the old man. Now, move. In the chaos, in the screaming and the running, and the ambulance siren growing in the distance, one small thing happened that nobody but Adaeze noticed. As they lifted the chief onto the stretcher, his eyes opened, and they found her face in the crowd, and his hand, weak as a child's, lifted off the stretcher and reached toward her, toward the tortoise pendant at her throat. His lips moved. No sound came out. But Adaeze, who could read a person's eyes the way her teachers once praised her for reading a case, saw the shape of the word he was trying to say. It looked like a name. It looked like the name Kayamika, her mother's name. The chief was rushed to a private hospital, and the question of the ring was, for the moment, forgotten in the larger question of whether he would live. But Ngozi did not forget it. The moment the immediate danger passed, the moment the doctor said the chief was stable but needed rest, Ngozi moved to finish what she had started. "He is sick because of the stress that girl brought into this house," she told the household. And to her surprise, some of them believed her, because fear makes people believe the loudest voice. "I want her gone. Tonight. I do not care about the police anymore. I just want her out of my sight. Take her bag and throw it at the gate." And so Adaeze Okonkwo, who had given 2 years of her life to that house, who had never stolen anything but a few minutes of crying time at night, was put out at the iron gate in the dark, with her small bag, accused of a theft she did not commit, with no job, a sick mother, and a landlord counting the days. She stood outside the gate. She had been so afraid to enter 2 years before, and now she was equally afraid to leave it, and she did not know what to do. She had every reason in the world to walk away from the Namdi family and never look back. They had used her, insulted her, and finally framed her. Any reasonable person would have spat at that gate and gone. But Adaeze kept thinking about the old man reaching for her necklace, about the word her mother's name made on his lips, about the fact that of every person in that golden house, the only one who had ever knelt for her was now lying in a hospital bed, possibly dying, surrounded by people who saw him only as a will waiting to be read. And so she did something that Ngozi, who measured everyone by her own heart, could never have predicted. She did not go home. She went to the hospital. She had no money for a taxi, so she walked, and then she took 2 Danfo buses across the city. And she arrived at the private hospital looking exactly like what they had called her, a poor girl in a cheap wrapper. And the security would not let her in. So she waited. She sat on the curb outside the hospital all night, through the mosquitoes and the suspicious eyes of the night guard, who twice told her to move along. And each time she had moved exactly far enough to satisfy him, and then come quietly back. She had nothing to gain by being there. No job protect, no inheritance court, no audience to impress. She did not even know yet what the chief was to her. She only knew that a man had once knelt on the floor for her, and that the world had taught her that kneeling for the lowly is the single rarest thing a powerful person can do, and that a debt like that is not paid by walking away when the man is dying. In the morning, when Emeka came out for air, exhausted and gray, he found her there. "Adaeze, what are you doing here?" "They told me you left." "They put me out," she said simply. "But I want to know if he is all right. That is all. I am not here for anything. I will go after you tell me. Is the chief all right?" Emeka looked at this girl who had every reason to curse his family, and who had instead slept on a curb to ask after a sick man, and something in his understanding of the world shifted a little. "Come inside," he said. "Come and see for yourself." The chief was awake, weak, hooked the machines, but awake. And when Adaeze stepped into the room, the change in his face was so sudden and so complete that Emeka noticed it too. The old man's eyes filled with tears. "You came," the chief whispered. "Even after what they did, you came." "You knelt for me, sir," Adaeze said. "Nobody ever knelt for me before. I could not just walk away." And so began the strangest 2 weeks of Adaeze's life. She stayed at the hospital, not as staff, because she had no job, but simply because the chief did not want to leave, and because someone needed to actually care for the old man instead of merely waiting for him to die. Ngozi visited once a day, for 15 minutes, checking her phone, talking about company matters the chief was too tired to follow, leaving as fast as she had come. But Adaeze was there in the long hours. She learned how he liked his tea. She read to him. She noticed when he was in pain before he said it. And she called a nurse before he had to ask. "You watch people," the chief said to her one evening, surprising her. "You see what they need before they say it. That is a rare thing. Where did you learn it?" "From being invisible, sir," Adaeze said, and then was embarrassed by her own honesty. When nobody looks at you, you have plenty of time to look at everybody else. You learn to read faces. It is the only book the poor are allowed to read for free. The chief was quiet for a long time after that. "Tell me something," he said eventually. "In my house, the hours you worked, when did you wake?" "5, sir." "Sometimes before." "And when did you sleep?" "When the last person in the house slept." 11. Midnight on party nights. The chief's jaw tightened. "And nobody ever told you that even a house girl is owed rest? That there are rules now, real rules, about hours, about pay, about how a person who works in your home must be treated. That a person's papers, her own documents, may not be kept from her, the way some wicked families do, to trap their staff. Rules like that are for people the law remembers, sir," Adaeze said without bitterness, simply stating a thing she had long known. "The law forgets people like me. Or rather, people like me cannot afford to remind it. To go to a labor office, you need time off, and money for transport, and the boldness to make an enemy of the hand that feeds you. So we keep quiet. We manage. That word, sir, managing, it is a whole life of the poor in one word." The chief looked at this girl, this stranger who had slept on a curb for him, and he felt something he had not felt in many years, which was shame. Not the small shame of being caught in an error, but the deep shame of a man who realizes that the comfort he has lived and was built in 100 invisible ways, on people exactly like her, managing. "You said you wanted to be a lawyer," he said. Adaeze's hand went still on the cup she was holding. "How do you—" "Emeka told me. He said you argue like a senior advocate, and you do not even know it." The old man studied her. "Why did you stop?" "Because my mother started coughing blood, sir, and a dream is the first thing a poor family sells. You cannot eat a dream. You cannot buy medicine with it. So you fold it up and you put it away, and you tell yourself you will take it out again one day, knowing in your heart that day will never come." She set the cup down very carefully. "Education is the one road out of poverty that nobody can steal from you once you've walked it, sir. But it is also the road they make the most expensive, because the people at the top understand exactly what an educated poor person becomes. Dangerous. So they price the road out of our reach, and then they call us lazy for not walking it." The chief did not answer. But that night, after she had gone to rest, he lay awake in his hospital bed for a long time, turning her words over. And somewhere in the dark of it, a decision began to form in him that would change both their lives. It was during those hospital weeks that Adaeze and Emeka truly came to know each other. And it happened in the way real things happen, slowly, in small moments, with no drums and no lightning. He brought her food and discovered she had been a brilliant student. She mended a tear in his shirt cuff with 3 quick stitches, and he watched her hands and forgot what he'd been saying. They played a foolish card game at 2 in the morning, when the chief was sleeping, and she beat him 5 times in a row. And when she laughed, really laughed, for the first time since he had known her, Emeka realized he had been waiting 2 weeks to hear that sound. "Can I ask you something?" he said one night. "Why did they never see you in 2 years? How did everybody in that house walk past you every day and never once see what you are?" "Because they were not looking for a person," Adaeze said. "They were looking for a function, a pair of hands. When you decide ahead of time that someone is beneath you, your eyes obey the decision. You stop seeing them. It is not that they cannot see me, Emeka. It is that they had already agreed not to." He never forgot that sentence. None of us should. But while kindness was growing quietly in that hospital room, something else was growing too. The chief, lying in his bed with nothing to do but think, kept looking at the tortoise pendant around Adaeze's neck. And finally, one afternoon, he could bear it no longer. "That necklace," he said. "Where did you get it?" "My mother gave it to me, sir. She said it came from my father. I never met him. She said he was a rich man who threw us away." Adaeze touched the small tortoise without thinking. "It is the only thing I have from him. She made me promise never to lose it. She said one day it might give me back something I lost." The chief's hands began to shake. "Your mother? What is your mother's name?" "Kayamaka, sir. Kayamaka Okonkwo." The room went so silent that Adaeze could hear the machines counting the old man's heartbeats, and she watched those numbers climb as something broke open across his face. "Kayamaka," he whispered. "Kayamaka Okonkwo, from Ajigunle, who used to work in the house of Madame Namdi. My mother." Her own heart had begun to pound now. "How are you? How do you know that?" The chief reached out and with trembling fingers opened a locket at the end of his own watch chain, a thing she had never seen him open. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of a young woman, beautiful, laughing, and around that young woman's neck, plain as day, was a tortoise pendant that was a twin of the one Adaeze wore. "Because," the chief said, and his voice broke completely, "I am the rich man who threw you away. Except I did not throw you away, my child. I swear before God I did not. I lost you. They took you from me. And I have spent 25 years looking for the two of you. And I had given up. I had truly given up. And then one morning, a house girl walked into my dining room, wearing the necklace I gave to the only woman I ever loved." Now you must understand what really happened, because the truth was crueler and kinder than anyone in that house had imagined. 25 years before, Obiageli Namdi had not yet been a chief or a billionaire. He had been a young man working in his mother's businesses. And in his mother's house, there had worked a house girl named Kayamaka, gentle and clever and proud. And the young Obiageli had fallen in love with her completely. He had given her a tortoise pendant, the symbol from the old stories of patience and survival, and he had promised to marry her, money or no money, family or no family. But his mother, the formidable old Madame Namdi, had found out, and Madame Namdi would sooner die than let a house girl carry the family name. While Obiageli was away on a business trip his mother had deliberately arranged, the old woman discovered that Kayamaka was pregnant, and she acted with the cold efficiency of the very rich. She had Kayamaka thrown out into the night, with a sum of money, and a single unforgettable threat, that if she ever came near Obiageli again, if she ever told him about the child, the Namdi family would make sure she and her baby did not survive the year. People disappeared in those days for less. Kayamaka, a poor pregnant girl against a fortress of money, did the only thing a mother could do. She ran. She disappeared into the vast ocean of Lagos, changed nothing but her circumstances, raised her daughter alone in poverty, and never told the child the truth, because the truth was a death sentence. She told her only that her father was a wicked rich man, because a hated father is easier to live without than a loved one stolen by force. And she kept the necklace, and she gave it to her daughter, and she planted in her the one seed of hope she dared to plant, that one day this small tortoise might find its way back to the man who gave it, and he might recognize his own. When Obiageli returned from his trip and found Kayamaka gone, his mother told him she had taken money and run off with another man. He did not believe it, not fully, but he could find no trace of her. And over the years, the lie hardened into a wound he stopped probing. He never married. He never had another child that he knew of. He took in his dead brother's daughter, Ngozi, and he built his empire. And the photograph on his desk that no one was allowed to touch was a young house girl, named Kayamaka, laughing with a tortoise around her neck. His mother died without ever confessing what she had done. He had given up hope entirely, until a girl with that same necklace knelt on his dining room floor. "You are my daughter," Chief Obiageli Namdi said, weeping in his hospital bed, holding the hand of the house girl his own household had called gutter and thief. "You have been cleaning my floors. My own child has been cleaning my floors, eating scraps, sleeping in the servants' quarters, while I sat in my big house mourning her. God forgive me. God forgive my mother. My daughter. My Adaeze. Your name. Your mother named you Adaeze. Princess. She named you what you truly are, and then she watched you grow up scrubbing toilets. To protect you. Do you see now? Do you see the kind of love your mother carried? Adaeze could not speak. 23 years of being nobody's anything, of being a function and not a person, of swallowing insults and crying into a thin pillow, collapsed inside her all at once. And the only thing she could do was hold the old man's hand and let the tears come. When she could finally speak again, what she said was not what either of them expected. All those mornings, she whispered, when you said good morning to me, when you told them to feed me from a family kitchen, when you knelt on the floor and took the broken plate from my hands. She looked at him. You did not know. You are telling me you did not know I was your daughter, but you still did all of that for a house girl you thought was a stranger. I did not know it here, the chief said, touching his head, but I think something in me knew it here. He touched his chest. A man does not choose who his heart reaches for. Adaeze. Mine had been reaching for you and your mother for 25 years, in the dark, with no name to call. When you walked into my dining room, my heart found something it had been searching for, and my foolish old head spent 2 years arguing with it. That is the truth. I was kind to you because some part of me already loved you, and I was too proud and too broken to ask why. And in that hospital room, the daughter who had been raised to believe her father was a wicked man, and the father who had been told his love had run off and abandoned him, sat together in the wreckage of an old woman's cruelty and began slowly to forgive the years they had lost. It would take a long time. 25 years is not undone in an afternoon, but it began there, with two people holding hands and a small tortoise pendant between them that had, against all the odds in the world, kept its ancient promise. It had given back what was lost. But there was no time for the long, gentle reunion they both deserved, because two things now had to happen, and they had to happen fast. The first was the truth about the ring. The second was the truth about the money, and both of them led to the same door. When the chief was strong enough to come home, he came home changed. He came home with a daughter beside him and a fury in his heart. And he came home with one quiet instruction to Emeka: pull the camera footage from the night the ring went missing, and bring in outside auditors to review every account in Namdi Holdings, going back 5 years. Ngozi heard about the auditors and felt the first true cold of fear move through her, because she understood at once that the game had changed. And she did not yet know how badly. She tried to fight. When the chief gathered the household and the board to reveal that Adaeze was his daughter, Ngozi laughed in the man's face. "This is madness," she said. "An old man, sick, confused, takes in a house girl with a cheap necklace and a clever story, and suddenly she is the heir. Daddy, she has manipulated you. She saw a weak old man, and she played you like a fool. There is no proof. A necklace is not proof. Anybody can buy a necklace." "You are right," said the chief calmly. "A necklace is not proof, which is why I did this." And he handed her a single sheet of paper. It was a DNA report from a registered medical laboratory, taken during the days at the hospital, signed and stamped. It said, in language no clever tongue could argue with, that the probability of eternity between Obiagel Namdi and Adaeze Okonkwo was greater than 99.9%. The paper trembled in Ngozi's hand. "I did not need the necklace," the chief said. "The necklace only told me where to look. Science told me the rest. She is my blood. She is my daughter. And there is no power on this earth, including you, that will take her from me a second time. It might have ended there, a happy reunion and a furious niece." But the chief was not a man to leave a wound half-cleaned, because while the DNA was being settled, Emeka had done the other thing. He had pulled the camera footage. And on the night the family gathered to hear the final truth, with the whole board present, and Barrister Tunde Adeyemi sitting smooth and confident in his fine suit, Emeka stood up and played the recording on the large screen in the chief's study. The footage was perfectly clear. The cameras had never been faulty. The screen showed the master bedroom at 2 a.m. It showed the safe. And it showed, plain as daylight, Ngozi Namdi keying in the code, removing her grandmother's diamond ring, and handing it to Barrister Tunde Adeyemi, who carried out a frame in the direction of the servants' quarters. The room did not breathe. You will say it was edited, Emeka said quietly. So I've already given the original, with its unbroken digital timestamp, to an independent forensic firm. Their report is in the folder in front of every board member. The recording is genuine. There is no edit. There is only the two of you, planting a ring in an innocent girl's room to destroy her. But the chief was not finished, and what came next was a blow that truly ended Ngozi. Because greed is a deeper sin than cruelty, the chief said. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. The auditors finished their review this morning. Over the past 3 years, a sum of 241 million naira has been moved out of Nnamdi Holdings through a network of 7 companies that exist only on paper. Companies created, signed, and controlled by my family lawyer, Barrister Tunde Adeyemi, with the knowledge and signature of my niece, Ngozi Nnamdi. He let the number sit in the room like a stone. That is not cruelty to a house girl. That is theft from a company that employs 4,000 people. That is a crime. And unlike the lie you told about my daughter, this one has your real signatures on it. Barrister Tunde was already on his feet, already reaching for the door. But the door opened before he got to it, and 2 police officers stepped through. Behind them, a third man entered, calm, in plain clothes, who introduced himself as being from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. What followed was not dramatic. In the way Ngozi might once have imagined drama, there was no screaming, no curse, no grand villain speech. There was only paperwork and handcuffs and the small, terrible sound of a proud woman's world ending quietly. Ngozi Nnamdi and Barrister Tunde Adeyemi were arrested that night and charged with conspiracy, forgery of documents, embezzlement of company funds, and the false accusation of crime, which, under the law, is itself a serious offense. As they let her pass Adaeze, Ngozi stopped. For the first time in 2 years, she looked at the house girls as equal, because they were equal now, both daughters of nothing, standing in a great house, except one had built her life on kindness, and one had built on cruelty, and the law had finally weighed the difference. 2 years, Ngozi said, and there was wonder in her voice and something almost like grief. 2 years I made your life hell, and you slept on a curb to ask if the old man was breathing. She shook her head slowly. I never had a chance against you, did I? I was fighting you with money. You were fighting with something I never had. And then she was gone. Now, here's the part of the story that matters most, and it is the part where most stories get it wrong. Because you might expect that Adaeze, the wronged house girl now revealed as the billionaire's only child and rightful heir, would take her seat on the throne, put on the fine clothes, command the servants who once tormented her, and live in glorious revenge for the rest of her days. She did not. A week after the arrest, when the house had gone quiet and the cameras of the newspapers had finally left the gate, the chief called Adaeze and Emeka into his study. He had drawn up the papers. He was an old man who had nearly died, and he had only one child, and he wanted to give her everything. The whole of Nnamdi Holdings, the houses, the cars, the empire, all of it. He held out the pen. Adaeze did not take it. Daddy, she said, and she had only just begun to call him that, and the words still felt enormous in her mouth. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me, because you taught me without knowing it that the worst thing you can do to a person is decide who they are without asking them. The chief set down the pen. For 23 years, Adaeze said, people decided who I was. To Ngozi, I was gutter. To the household, I was hands. To the world, I was a house girl, a thief, a nobody. And now you want to make me something else. An heiress, a princess, the owner of all of this. And Daddy, I love you for it. But it is the same thing. It is one more person deciding who Adaeze is and handing it to her. I do not want to be handed a life, not even a golden one. I have never once in my whole life been allowed to build something with my own hands and call it mine. Then what do you want? The chief asked, and there was no anger in it. Only a father trying for the first time to actually see his child. I want to go back to school, Adaeze said. I was going to be a lawyer once, the best of my year. I folded that dream and put away to keep my mother alive, and I have carried it folded up in my chest for 5 years. I want to unfold it. I want to earn my own name. Not Nnamdi, not even Princess. Adaeze Okonkwo, who studied, who worked, who became something because she chose it. Pay my school fees, Daddy, if you want to give me something, bring my mother home, and put her in a good hospital. Let me have my family back. But the empire, she smiled, and it was the same smile Emeka had fallen for in a hospital at 2 in the morning. The empire can wait until I have earned the right to deserve it, if I ever do. The chief looked at his daughter for a long moment, and then he did something he had not done in 25 years. He laughed, a real laugh, full and free, and there were tears in it. Your mother, he said almost exactly those words to me the day I tried to give her everything I had. She said a gift is not the same as a life. I did not understand it then. I think I am only understanding it now, from her daughter, 25 years too late. He took her hand. Go to school, my Adaeze. Become the best lawyer in this country. And when you are ready, if you are ever ready, this will all still be here. Not because I am handing it to you, because you have earned the wisdom to carry it. They brought Mama Kayamika home that same week. And the reunion of those two, the man who had loved her and lost her, and the woman who had protected their daughter at the cost of her own whole life, is a story for another day, because some things are too big to fit at the end of another story. It is enough to say that she was put in the best hospital in Lagos, and that her cough, which everyone thought was a death sentence, was something treatable that poverty had simply never let her treat, and that she lived, and that she saw her daughter call her father Daddy, and that on the day the doctor said she was well, she took off her own old wrapper and put on a fine one, not because she had become rich, but because, for the first time in 25 years, she was no longer afraid. Adaeze went back to school. She studied law, and she was, as everyone who had ever sat in a classroom with her could have told you, brilliant. She paid her own way as much as her father would allow, working in the company's legal office in the evenings, learning the empire she had refused from the bottom up, the only way she had ever known how to learn anything. And in time, she and Emeka married quietly, with Mama Kayamika in the front row, and the chief weeping openly and unashamed. And the diamond ring, the one that had nearly destroyed her, the one that had belonged to the very grandmother who had thrown her mother into the night, that ring, the chief had melted down. He used the gold to make two small things. A tortoise pendant for his wife, that might have been the love he had lost and found again as a friend, and a second tortoise for his daughter, to replace the cheap old chain she had worn through all her years of suffering. Except Adaeze refused to wear the new one. She kept the old, cheap, village-made tortoise around her neck for the rest of her life. This one found me when I had nothing, she would say, touching it. This one knew who I was when even I did not. I will not trade the thing that saved me for a prettier thing now that I am safe. That is not how you treat what is loyal to you. And that, my friends, is the end of the story of the house girl they called Gutter and Thief and Nobody, who turned out to be a princess, and who then chose to become something even harder and even better than a princess. She chose to become herself. Before we close this one out, if you have made it this far, you already know StorySphere brings you the stories that stay with you. So stick around to the lesson, because it is the real reason I told you this one. Now, let me tell you why I wanted to tell you this particular story, because I've been turning it over in my own mind for a while. I have, in my own life, watched the way people treat those they have decided are beneath them. I have seen the security man greeted like furniture. I have seen the house help spoken to like a tool that happens to breathe. I have watched well-dressed people in air-conditioned rooms decide, in the space of one glance, that the person serving them is not really a person at all, just a function, a pair of hands, a uniform. And every single time, I have wondered the same thing the chief learned too late. What if you are wrong about who that person is? What if the one you are stepping over is carrying something, a brilliance, a history, a whole hidden royalty that you cannot seize because you decided not to look? The truth that this story dresses up in diamonds and DNA is a very ordinary truth, and you do not need a billionaire father for it to be true about you. Every house girl is somebody's princess. Every cleaner, every driver, every nobody you have ever been tempted to look through is a hero of a story as large and as full of suffering and hope as your own. The Namby family did not lose their dignity the day Ngozi was arrested. They lost it years before. On every ordinary day, they walked past a kind, clever, suffering girl and decided she was not worth seeing. The lesson is not that the poor girl turned out to be secretly rich. The lesson is that she was always worth treating with dignity. On the very first day at the gate, when she was nothing but a frightened girl with a small bag, long before anybody knew about the necklace. If you only learn to respect people once you discover they are secretly important, you have not learned respect at all. You have only learned fear of important people. Real respect is the kind you give to the house girl when you still think she is only a house girl. So the next time life puts a so-called nobody in front of you, I hope you remember Adaeze. I hope you look at the person, not the uniform, because you never, ever know who is wearing it. If this story moved you, do me one kindness. Go and be gentle to one person today whom the world has taught you to overlook. That is the only thank you I want. And if you would like more stories like this one, you know what to do. Subscribe to StorySphere so you never miss the next one. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of the people the world forgets. This has been StorySphere.